All right, welcome everybody to another webinar from the Center for Agricultural Profitability at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. I'm Ryan Evans. I'm a communications specialist with the Center for Ag Profitability, and I'll always remind you, you can find a schedule of upcoming webinars and recordings of every webinar of ours on our website at cap.unl.edu. This recording should be posted later this afternoon if you'd like to revisit it or share it with anybody who couldn't make it as well. And as we go today, we definitely invite any questions you have to be submitted through the Q&A panel, and we will get to those at the end of the presentation. And today we are glad to be joined again by Dave Aiken, who's a professor in the Department of Agricultural Economics and an extension water law and agricultural law specialist with the Center for Ag Profitability. And we'll be talking about the Nebraska-Colorado water lawsuit that was filed on July 16th by Nebraska, filing to sue Colorado in the U.S. Supreme Court regarding the South Platte River Compact. So Dave will explore the background of what led up to the lawsuit and the general issues that Nebraska and Colorado would like the Supreme Court to address. And he'll also discuss what the role of a special master will be if the Supreme Court accepts the case, which then would likely take several years to resolve given the many legal issues involved. So again, we welcome any questions you have to be typed into the Q&A, and we'll work to answer those after Dave's presentation, but we're glad to have him back here presenting for us today. Dave Aiken, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ryan. And I am screen sharing. Oh, sorry, I need to do that, don't I?
It looks good.
How quickly they forget.
Dave, there we go. All right, looks good.
Sorry, Ryan. Okay,
No,
thank you very much. Good to be back in the webinar. And we're going to talk about what's going on with the South Platte River between Nebraska and Colorado. We have some interesting recent developments. So let's go ahead and get started. Here's a map that shows the Platte River, North Platte, originating in Colorado, then into Wyoming, and then into Nebraska, then the South Platte, originating in Colorado and again into Nebraska. If you look at the South Platte on the map, you see this little black line that I inexpertly drew in on this image, but that's the dividing line between the upper reach of the lower reach, and that's very important as far as Nebraska's water rights in the compact. And so we'll come back to the upper and lower reach in just a little bit. Okay, but just a little background on the South Platte River. It's originates in the Rocky Mountains. It includes the Denver metro, so a big chunk of Colorado population depends on water from the South Platte River for drinking water. And it's also where a good chunk of Colorado's irrigation occurs, and so that irrigation drives the ag economy in that South Platte basin. So that's very important. Now let's talk quickly about the compact. A little bit of the history. We have a small irrigation district, the Western Irrigation District in southwestern Nebraska, that depends on water from the South Platte River. And Colorado was not shutting off junior appropriators in Colorado to make sure that the Western Canal was getting the water that it was entitled to. So in 1916, Nebraska sued the state of Colorado, and the Colorado folks said, well, instead of fighting this out in court, why don't we see if we can negotiate one of these newfangled interstate water compacts? And so that's the background in terms of the 1923 compact. And as I indicated on the map, and we'll see it again, and I think on the next slide, the compact divides the river into the upper section and the lower section. And for me, I think of the upper section, which it looks to be about 2/3 of the river, as the Denver section. And then the lower section is, if you want to, the Nebraska section, although that's a little bit of an overstatement. But the important point is that we don't have any water rights in the upper section, and the compact makes that fairly clear. So our water rights and our ability to have Colorado regulate junior appropriators for the benefit of senior appropriators downstream in Nebraska, that is pretty much limited to the lower section. So that's it's good to understand that up front, because that's important for quite a few things, as we'll see later in the talk. Okay, so the compact, and so one of the things the compact did is that Colorado said, yes, we will regulate junior appropriators in the lower reach to make sure that the Western Canal gets its 120 cubic feet per second, or CFS, during the irrigation season, which is, I think, April 1st to the middle of October. So it's 6.5 months. But presumably, and I don't know this, but presumably the Western Canal is not diverting water all the time during the irrigation season, especially if we've gotten a nice rain or something like that, they can wait on the water then, that sort of thing. But but that is the one active water right that we have. Then the last part, next issue in the compact, is the Perkins County Canal, and this is, of course, what's at issue between Nebraska and Colorado. And under the compact, Nebraska is entitled up to 500 CFS, which is a nice amount of stream flow, during the off season. So that's, October 15th up to April 1st, I think. 500 CFS for the use for diversion by the Perkins County Canal. But Colorado reserved 35,000 acre feet for potential diversion and presumably storage in Colorado. But the other part of the Perkins Canal water right is that surplus in-season flows, Nebraska, or excuse me, the Western Irrigation District is entitled to divert that, in the Perkins County Canal. So that's, so there's two dimensions to the water rights associated with the canal: the 500 CFS during the irrigation season, and then surplus flows, 500 CFS for the off season, and then surplus flows during the in-stream season. So during the irrigation season. So that's so that in a nutshell is what the water rights are. And if the lawsuit proceeds, we will probably get better clarification of what are the legal limits to the Perkins County Canal water rights. But that's kind of how it is now. Okay, there's that map again. And now that you know the significance between the upper reach and the lower reach, you can take a look, and then there's that lower reach, the 1/3 of the river that flows into Nebraska, and then the upper 2/3 that originates in the Rocky Mountains and flows through the Denver metro and so on. So that's the upper reach and the lower reach again. Okay, let's take a look at irrigation in the South Platte Basin. And Um, I've looked at a lot of reports out of uh, Colorado regarding irrigation, water use on the South Platte and so forth. And you get different numbers from different reports and stuff like that. But I guess maybe we'll say at the peak, there were 1 million acres irrigated in the South Platte Basin. Over half of that is irrigated from surface water, 17% exclusively from wells, and then 28% is surface water with supplemental wells. So, when the surface water user runs out of priority uh, and can't divert from the river, they can uh, switch on the well, assuming that the well is not out of priority as well. Um, Now, there have been, in recent years, as many as 4 million acres irrigated in Colorado, but uh, 3 million acres are consistently irrigated. And as we'll see in an upcoming slide, Colorado's in an awful drought. And so they are not getting the stream flows that they used to, and they're certainly not getting the irrigation season precipitation that they might have gotten in a more normal year. So, uh, you know, so the South Platte is a big chunk of the irrigation in the state of Colorado. Now, one of the issues that we will be encountering, and I just stuck that in here because we're talking about how many acres. Uh, well, let me back up real quick. Um, Roughly, I said 1 million acres in the South Platte at the peak. Now, because of the drought and because of uh, the reduction of groundwater irrigation in the South Platte Basin, maybe it's closer to 900,000 acres rather than 1 million acres. But let's call it 900,000 acres in terms of what's currently irrigated in the South Platte. Again, that's, if we get into a full-blown lawsuit, all of these numbers will be nailed down and stuff like that officially. But this is kind of what I've been able to glean from the water planning reports out of Colorado and so forth. Okay, one of the issues is that as Denver continues to grow in population, and the Denver metro is about 3 million people, so it's over 3 million people, I guess. Um, you know, need more water, and what they have been doing is buying water rights from irrigators in the South Platte. And I would expect mostly surface water irrigators, because those would be the oldest rights, and so they would be the most secure rights in terms of secure water supply. Um, they've been buying those water rights up, leasing the water back to the farmer. But then as they need that water to become part of their municipal water supply, then they said, okay, we're not going to lease it to you anymore. We're gonna get the water and use it for municipal industrial purposes in the Denver metro. And um, as Denver is expected to grow, it looks like there could be another 340,000 acres. Oh, the missing zero there. Sorry about that. But 340,000 acres could also be taken out of production when the water rights are sold off to Denver to meet needs by the year 2050 in the Denver metro. So that's also a huge issue, driving a lot of this, and frankly, what has brought this South Platte Basin uh, conflict between the two states to a head. Okay, now I talked a little bit about the drought, and we'll talk about it a little bit more. But the South Platte originally had around 9,000 acres of decreed wells. These are wells that have gone through the water courts under Colorado's water law system to get their water appropriations for their wells. confirmed in the court by the court. But about around 4,000 wells or more have been shut off for good because there is no source of replacement water for them to make up for the stream depletion effect that their wells generate when the wells are pumped. And for decades, going back, I think maybe at least to the 1970s, there was enough surplus water in reservoirs in the South Platte Basin that groundwater irrigators collectively could, lease water from these reservoirs and use that to dump the water into the stream when it was needed to meet a priority call that the wells were junior to. And that worked great for a long time until 2002, when this mega drought hit. And it's a mega drought because it's still ongoing, and it really hasn't let up. And if it keeps on going, it may be kind of permanent. But anyway, the main source of that replacement water is no longer available, and it won't be until the rains come back. So 4,000 wells, which is a huge number for the South Platte, are basically out of commission, and another 1,000 are limited. They can only irrigate a couple days a week. So it's the drought has had a huge impact on the irrigation in the South Platte Basin, both in terms of inadequate precipitation during the growing season and reduced reservoir water and also reduced flows in the river itself. So and I mentioned the buy and dry phenomenon, when water utilities from the Denver metro region buy senior water rights in the South Platte River and then use that to increase their municipal water supplies, and future growth could lead to, if that's the only way that the increased growth is needed, and increased water demand can be met, then another 300 and some thousand acres could be dried up, which would be another big hit for irrigation and agriculture in the South Platte Basin. And so the drought kind of fired up water planning in Colorado. They did the state water plan in 2010, and that's where the buy and dry was kind of at least identified as the main option that the Denver metro water managers could probably use to meet their needs. And now after 2010, the 8 river basins in Colorado are developing their own plans, and the South Platte Basin issued reports in 2015 and 2022. And in the 2015 water planning report, the South Platte identified this buy and dry as their main concern. The report identified the 500,000 acre feet water supply gap in 2050 for the Denver metro, and said if you just continue doing the buy and dry, that's really going to take a big chunk out of irrigated agriculture in the South Platte Basin. So can you look at some other options? And please, can you look at some other options? And so out of that 2015 report, there was a request made to the legislature to examine how much water is leaving the state through the South Platte River into Nebraska, and how much does it need to be to meet the minimum requirements of the compact as opposed to what's happening now. And so that was the 2017 study, which we'll look at next. And then after that report, there was a later report that looked at, well, if there is too much, in quotes, water going out of the South Platte into Nebraska, how can we keep that water in Colorado? So the 2017 study, again, this was done for the legislature. The legislature, the report came back and said, the long story short, if we were able to deliver only the water that was necessary to meet our minimum requirements under the compact, then there would be somewhere between 300 and 350,000 acre feet available for capture and use in Colorado. Now, that amount would vary quite a bit, vary from 54,000 acre feet on the low end to 815,000 acre feet in a flood year. So, but that's the numbers, or those are the numbers that were identified in this storage study. And of course, they want to save that water. We like having that water come into Nebraska. So, their excess water is our thank you very much water. But that's kind of what we will be fighting about between the two states. Okay, after this legislative report identified this quote, excess water or surplus water coming into Nebraska above the compact minimum requirements, the South Platte Water Study Group got fired up again, and they commissioned a study, the South Platte Regional Opportunities Water Group study. I call it the SPROWG study, and it's basically a collection of municipal water managers, probably most of them from the Denver metro area. And in a nutshell, the proposal that was presented in this study would be to capture South Platte water return flows and runoff before it crosses the dividing line between the upper section, the Denver section, and the lower section, the Nebraska section. So try to catch that water before it hits the Nebraska section of the river, and then pipe the water back up, back up the mountains, to Denver, and for treatment and then use as municipal and industrial water. And there's a diagram of this in the next slide, so that will help you see what this is about. But between 200 and 400,000 acre feet storage proposed, different variations, different options and so forth. But this proposal does a few things. Denver would get credit with Western Slope folks for reusing the Trans Mountain water that Denver gets, and which is still, has people on the West Slope unhappy about it, especially now that they're in the middle of a drought too. So Denver's aggressively reusing that water, and so they say that's good. They're not going to come back here for more Trans Mountain water than they already have. They hope, keeping their fingers crossed. And then also the ag complex in the South Platte Basin says, well, if this cuts back on the buy and dry, that's going to, try to help us hang on as an agricultural complex, economic complex in the South Platte Basin. So that's, so that's some benefits from that. But if I'm reading this report correctly, it's not making a huge dent in the projected water supply gap, the 500 100,000 acre feet. During normal or wet years, it would only provide 50,000 acre feet for municipal and industrial water. And then in dry years, it would provide 100,000 acre feet. And dry years, of course, is when they would need the water the most. But anyway, and then the projected cost between $1 and $3.5 billion. Of course, as time goes on, those costs are going to go up. But anyway, that's where they pegged it in 2020. Okay, now this is probably the most important map in the whole talk. But the orange circles are potential storage sites. And if you look at the one that's kind of in the middle of the slide, it says potential storage facility near Hill Rose. And I don't know where Hill Rose is, but you see the orange lines, and the orange lines are pipelines. And you see our little black line between the upper and the lower reach. And so what they're doing, that maybe looks like a staple or something, that little orange hut on the upper, on the north side of the river near that Hill Rose storage facility. That's a diversion from the river, and then it's piped into that storage facility, and then the water is piped back up to the Denver metro region. And so what they would do is that they would take as much water out of the tail end of the Denver reach or the upper reach of the South Platte River before it hit the Nebraska reach. And that would have the potential to significantly reduce flows into Nebraska if those facilities were developed. And I suspect, I've never talked to anybody in Nebraska state government about this, but I suspect that this is what got the alarm bells ringing in terms of what could be happening on the South Platte River. Then if you look at the upper right-hand corner, you see another storage facility near Julesburg, and this is in the Nebraska stretch of the river. But they're saying, well, if we're sending more water across the state line than the 120 CFS, or if there's no call from the Western Canal, we can take out as much water as we can and potentially dry the stream up coming into Nebraska. So it's more of the same, only it would give them the opportunity to really fine tune and really try to get as close to the legal minimum that they need to send to Nebraska that the Colorado folks would have to do under the compact. So these are the projects, or this is the proposed project that is driving a lot of the Nebraska concern in terms of future South Platte flows into Nebraska. Okay, so the SPROWG report was 2020, and in 2022, Governor Ricketts proposed, and the legislature, he proposed $500 million for the Perkins County Canal. Perkins County Canal. They didn't do the whole chunk in 2022, but I think was 53 or 55 million to do a plan and an evaluation in terms of, would this be good for Nebraska? How much would it cost? That kind of thing, kind of a feasibility study. And now, close, over 600 million appropriations. I haven't dug it out of the budget bill or anything like that, but that's the number that shows up in the press all the time. In 2022, and this is according to the complaint that Nebraska filed recently in the U.S. Supreme Court, uh, the inflows from the South Platte to the Western Canal fell below the 120 CFS, and the irrigators from the canal, basically experienced crop failures because of the uh, inflows, uh, the lack of water coming from the South Platte, and so the DWEE uh, has, which is the brand new Department of Water, Environment, and Energy. It's basically the combination of the Department of Environment and Energy with the Department of Natural Resources. Uh, but so the Water Rights Agency is part of DWEE now. And they have been working to acquire voluntary easements for the canal right of way from Colorado landowners. And for a while, it looked like the Colorado folks were you know, were not going to kick up much of a fuss, but that didn't last very long. And I think the Attorney General and maybe even the governor have said, don't do that. Don't sign an easement agreement with Nebraska. Uh, uh, make them go to court and condemn it. But Colorado hasn't gone to court to try to stop Nebraska. But if Nebraska filed in a condemnation lawsuit in Colorado court, then the state would have opposed. The state of Colorado would have opposed that. Okay, so because Colorado has been resisting Nebraska's efforts to pursue the development of the Perkins County Canal. Nebraska has filed its lawsuit, in July, and they're as I've been able to try to figure it out. Nebraska is alleging that Colorado has not protected the 120 CFS water right for the Western Canal, and then it's also diminished the two parts of the Perkins County Canal water rights, the off-season flow 500 CFS right and the uh, uh, surplus flows in season irrigation season right to the Perkins County Canal. And that and I think those allegations are basically correct. Colorado has been trying to maximize the use of groundwater and surface water in the South Platte Basin, throughout Colorado, of course, but we're interested in the South Platte Basin. Tried to maximize the use of all the water resources available to it for the benefit of Colorado. And so it doesn't want to send any more water into Nebraska than it has to. And so it has not taken any steps to try to protect water rights for Nebraska if Nebraska ever gets around to developing the Perkins County Canal. And so, I think Nebraska's allegations are correct. Whether those allegations are compact violations however, is a legal question, and that, I'm not in a position to answer that legal question. Now, the lawsuit was filed in July. Colorado just got an extension to file its reply to Nebraska's complaint, extended to October 15th. Originally was due September 15th, but they got a month extension. And it's Supreme Court, Supreme Court accepts the case, and I think it's extremely likely that they will. I'd be stunned if they didn't accept the case. So I expect them to accept the case. The Supreme Court will appoint who is called a special master, which is typically a retired federal judge. to hear the case and then to make a report with the special master's recommendations to the Supreme Court. And this is exactly what happened in the Kansas versus Nebraska Republican River Compact lawsuits, that we experienced, in the not too distant past. So this is, the same sort of process. This is the way the Supreme Court almost always deals with water lawsuits between states. So I expect that's what's going to happen here. And, these cases are never fast. So it'll take time, but how it proceeds will depend an awful lot on the special master, how he or she wants to proceed. But that we'll just kind of have to be patient and wait to see how that all plays out. Okay, now we know what Nebraska has alleged. That Colorado is not protecting the Western Canal, 120 CFS, and is cutting into what Nebraska would be entitled to under with the Perkins County Canal for the off-season storage and the irrigation season surplus flows. And so those are the issues that Nebraska has put on the table. Colorado has a couple of issues that's going to put on the table too, and they're also very interesting and very interesting from legal perspective. First one is whether Nebraska can exercise condemnation in Colorado. And you're saying to yourself, well, the compact, Colorado said in the compact, we're going to let Nebraska do this. We're going to let Nebraska, condemn a water right, or excuse me, condemn rights of ways so it can build the Perkins County Canal. What's the legal issue with that? Well, the legal issue is that condemnation is kind of a sovereign state authority, and the legal question is, can one state delegate its sovereign authority to another state, and basically let Nebraska come in and say, well, we're an arm of the state government of Colorado, and so we're condemning your land under Colorado law. Does that really work? I mean, if Colorado wanted to condemn the right of way for the compact, they could probably do it, because they're sovereign in the state of Colorado, and they could exercise that condemnation right. But whether Nebraska could come in as another state, even if the state of Colorado says, yeah, we said in 1923 that you could do it, we'll just kind of have to see. And that is pretty much a purely legal issue. And there's not. I mean, there will probably be some fact finding in terms of the history of the Perkins County Canal and stuff like that. But that is kind of a legal issue, and so we don't need a lot of engineering studies or hydrologic studies or stuff like that to get at that issue. So potentially that could be an issue that the court could address fairly early, or the special master could address fairly early. But again, depends on how they want to run the case, and we'll wait and see. The
Dave,
second issue.
sorry, Dave, to interrupt. I wondered if I could jump in because there was a question somebody had related to just that condemnation issue you were talking about. If you're aware, if there's any precedent, if this has been done anywhere to create any legal precedent of any sort with the condemnation issue.
Okay. Am I aware of any? No, I'm not aware of any precedent either way. And so I'm going to be real interested to see what the what the special master and ultimately the Supreme Court, what they do with this. But no, if there was a clear answer to this that I was aware of, I wouldn't I wouldn't beat around the bush. I'd say, here's what this case said. So, but I don't know. Uh, and I don't know of any precedents with this next case or with this next issue either one. So just jumping out there. And this is the question of, is it too late for Nebraska to try to develop the Perkins County Canal, over 100 years from when the compact went into effect? And if the state of Nebraska, if it wasn't the state of Nebraska, if it was like an irrigation district or irrigation company or something like that, I would think that it would be a lot easier for the courts to say, no, you haven't pursued your water right project with due diligence in order to entitle you to a water right with a priority date that would go back to 1923. And but the state of Nebraska is a sovereign, as is the state of Colorado, as each state in the United States is, and they get a lot more leeway in terms of how they, of the things that they have to do. They don't always. They're not. They're dealt with a lot more flexibly than um, than would be the case for individuals or um, private entities or something like that. So because Nebraska is a state, uh, it's not clear to me that the courts would say, well, yeah, Nebraska's waited too long, because Nebraska is a state and they have a lot more flexibilities. But this is an issue and these are both issues that I'll be looking for when um, Colorado files its reply briefs and answer to the complaint in October, assuming that they, don't ask for another extension and stuff. But this is, all very interesting. And these excuse me, these legal issues are interesting, and I do not know of any authority. Of course, I'm not an expert in this area, but I'm not aware of any authority that or court case that deals with this or even provides insight into this. So we'll kind of have to wait to see what the special master comes up with, and of course the states, because the Nebraska will say yes, we can. We can go ahead and develop the compact because we can go ahead and develop the canal because the compact says we can. And Colorado said, no, you can't because it's too long. And both of them will have lots of legal things to justify their position stuff. So, but we'll see how that plays out. Now, the last one, and that's kind of a legal wild card, and I'm being a little bit optimistic here, is we have the whooping crane habitat in the Big Bend region of the Platte and the Central Platte River in Nebraska, basically from Lexington to Chapman. And that's habitat for the whooping crane. Whooping crane is endangered. And it's critical habitat for the whooping crane. So that's entitled to a lot of legal protection. And, that may be that if the SPROWG project or something like that, or efforts by Colorado to minimize the water that comes into the Nebraska through the South Platte River, if that would hurt the whooping crane or the whooping crane habitat, that would be a plus for Nebraska on the legal side. If building if building the canal would benefit the habitat, that would also be a plus for Nebraska, legally speaking. So, we'll just kind of have to see. We'll kind of have to see how that all plays out. Now, okay, the last slide. Money. Both of these, the canal will be expensive. The SPROWG project will be really expensive. And, one of the things that I've tried to bear in mind is that at some point, Nebraska can say we don't have enough money to build a canal because we're trying to cut property taxes or whatever it is, provide property tax relief, or the folks in the Denver Metro can say, we can't build this project to take as much water out of South Platte as is humanly possible, and then pipe that back upstream, which is not cheap. In order to have enough water, we can get that water cheaper by buying out irrigators. Uh, you know, that cost factor is something that's significant. And one thing that we've seen happen around the country, but mainly in arid regions, Florida being an exception, but we've seen a lot of municipalities, large and small, taking their sewage water that has been treated, to meet water quality requirements, taking that and treating it even more, treating it up to drinking water standards. And they're doing that because they can't find another source of water anyplace else that's, cheaper than taking the sewage water and that would otherwise be discharged into a stream, and cleaning that up, treating that to drinking water standards, and then using that as part of their drinking water supply. Clearly, it's something that's would be a last resort because drinking reclaimed sewage water is going to have a NUC factor, use. People are not going to be real thrilled about that. Going to be worried about whether it's safe to drink and all that. But it is becoming. I mean, it's not super widespread at this point, but there are at least probably dozens of municipalities around the country that are doing it, and so that may be something that Denver ends up looking at, if it's not looking at that already. And I think that that's something that, as climate change continues, and as the more of our annual precipitation is moved out of the summer, out of the growing season time of the year into the spring, and then we have these kind of more drought-like conditions every summer. Uh, uh, we're going to have farmers, ranchers, small communities, other rural residents. They're going to have drinking water challenges just from the drought and the heavy pumping load that the groundwater will be facing in terms of trying to meet irrigation demands. So that may be, the reclaimed sewage water or recycled sewage water may be something that we're looking at in Nebraska as well, just as trying to deal with drought as that intensifies in years to come. Okay, I think that's it. And so I'll turn it back to you, Ryan, and we'll see if people have questions.
Thank you very much, Dave. And yeah, if anyone has questions, please feel free to type those into the Q&A, and we will work to get as many addressed as we can in the 10 minutes or so we have left. I'll go to this one first, Dave, since you just talked about it. Who determines if SPROWG is harmful or helpful to whooping cranes? Do you know?
Say that again.
Who determines if SPROWG is harmful or helpful to whooping cranes?
Well, that would be something that, assuming it goes to the special master, could tell Colorado that that's something that it wants examined, and that's that the special master will have, just as we had in the Republican River lawsuit with Kansas. The special master is going to have a bunch of questions that they want factual answers to, data to be developed and so forth. And so they will say, okay, Nebraska and Kansas, I want you to look at, how do Nebraska irrigation wells impact Republican River stream flow into Kansas. And, special master could say, okay, Nebraska and Colorado, we want to look at what would this SPROWG project implemented at, different levels. What would the impact of that be on South Platte inflows into Nebraska, and how would that affect water flows through the habitat for the whooping cranes? So, special master would tell them to do it, and so they would say, okay, we'll need a few months, but we'll get our people to work on it, and then probably each state would present their own analysis. The Colorado analysis would say, well, it's not going to, they're not going to be able to tell. And the Nebraska analysis says, oh no, you're wrong. It's going to be, in a dry year, it's going to make a big difference. And so, but that's how, and then the judge decides whose analysis is more persuasive. But the judge, the special master is like a trial judge. And, so the judge is the judge and the jury. And so they decide if they believe that the SPROWG would hurt, the habitat or not.
All right, thanks, Dave. Another person just asked if, regarding the whooping crane habitat, if the federal government or environmental groups might become parties to this.
Does the federal government require what?
If the federal government or environmental groups might become parties to this lawsuit, since the whooping crane
Sure.
habitats are involved.
Yep, I would expect that they are considering. They'll probably wait to see whether the Supreme Court accepts the case. But if the Supreme Court accepts the case, as I expect them to, I would expect them to petition the court to be added as parties. That happened, a long time ago on the Gray Rocks controversy on the North Platte River, but it was the same thing. It was, interstate water dispute between the states, and as the settlement of that lawsuit created the Platte River Whooping Crane Trust, and so but I would expect that to happen, but probably not in the very early stages. But if they accept the case, certainly if they accept the case, I would expect them to request to be made a part of the case.
Great, thank you. Two questions came in about specific legal doctrines. So I'll just throw those out here. The impossibility of performance, and then the doctrine of unforeseeability. Both of those seem to come down to basically Colorado claiming that they can't meet this obligation to deliver water, maybe because of drought or lack of snowfall or snowpack or rainfall. Do you see either of those specific legal doctrines maybe playing a role in this?
Okay. When Nebraska said Colorado isn't doing enough to protect the 100 CFS coming into Nebraska, they're going back probably to the 1970s when the wells, the irrigation wells, started to come into the South Platte Basin and started depleting, having stream flow depletion effects on the river. And in the complaint, the state of Nebraska doesn't have to prove anything. They don't have to prove any facts. So they didn't say, here's all the bad things that Colorado has, or here are all the things that Colorado should have done that they didn't do, and stuff like that. I mean, they kind of touch on those things, but it's not what would be required to make that argument before the special master. The special master will want proof of Nebraska's allegations. The allegations are certainly very credible, and they say that the whole system for replacement water, making groundwater users making replacement water available to increase flows in the South Platte, and that They said that system is so confusing uh, and so hard to understand that, you know, Nebraska and the 120 CFS for the uh, uh, Western Canal gets lost in the shuffle. And but and I think that's a fair statement as a general statement. But Nebraska would have to do much more to actually prove that uh, before the special master. So, um, you know, clearly the drought. If there's no snowpack, no rainfall, there's not going to be much water coming down the South Platte River. That's not Colorado's fault. But, Nebraska's brief makes the point that, what's happened in the last 50 years on the South Platte River has changed the river's hydrology. It was probably a gaining stream where groundwater fed the stream. Now there are probably places and times where it becomes a losing stream, and because of groundwater pumping. And so that's the sort of stuff and then how the replacement water system is an attempt to try to deal with that situation, and how successfully it dealt with that situation, and in what time frame that dealt with that situation. Were they just trying to make it up from one year to the next? If that's the case, then when the flows into Nebraska are below the 120 CFS during the irrigation season, making that up next year doesn't help Nebraska at all in this year. So I think it's a very credible argument, and I don't, but as to how persuasive that is, we're going to need a lot of facts that we don't have yet. But if the case proceeds, that those facts will certainly be developed.
That's great because somebody just asked right before that if Colorado might say Nebraska is not doing its part to protect senior water rights because Nebraska is not using wells that are augmented as Colorado is for the groundwater issue.
Yeah, well, somebody could make that argument and say, as an equitable basis, Nebraska doesn't care how much irrigation wells affect stream flow. And Colorado at least tries. It's an imperfect system, but they at least try. And so, Colorado no doubt would make that argument. And so, what they're trying to do is to say, yeah, Nebraska's kind of got a point, but look at them. They don't come into court with clean hands. They have, they've dropped the ball on this in terms of their own policy, and so they're in no position to criticize us because our policy isn't perfect. So, I could see that happening.
And then do you have an idea or guess of how fast SCOTUS might take up the case and rule on the questions?
I really don't. It'd be nice if they decided whether or not to accept the case or not, by the end of the year. That'd be real nice, and appointed a special master by then. But I expect that the next few months may be pretty busy for them with some pretty high priority things. So I'm not, I can't even make my guess would be an educated guess. And so, all I can say is don't hold your breath. It's not going to be, I'd be stunned if it was the end of October. They looked at the Colorado brief and said, okay, we're going to appoint the special master and get this one going. I suppose it's possible, but boy, would I be surprised.
Yeah, I'll kind of tie two questions together here. One just asks, what will water from the Perkins Canal be used for? And then the second one, if you have an idea if this case or the canal would have any effect on the Republican Basin water supply and conservation efforts there.
Okay, I'm not seeing any, nothing is jumping out at me in terms of the Republican basin, uh, and Kansas. But in terms of what the water is going to be used for, I think that kind of remains to be determined. I presume, you know, the in 1923, the Perkins County Canal was perceived as being an irrigation water supply project, and I'm assuming that that's what it would be used for. But I'm, you know, I it remains to be seen. I don't think we have to decide that right now. We have to see if we're going to get it first, or if we need it. If we need it in the sense of, Colorado was going to try to minimize the flows into Nebraska, then we would need it for sure.
Great. Is there any interpretation of the South Platte Compact that would limit Nebraska's entitlement to surplus flows in the lower section, or does Colorado have rights to those flows too? Are you aware?
I mean, that whole surplus flow issue kind of jumped out of me because that was something that I really hadn't thought of. But uh, there's a lot of the compact is written in fairly broad language, and that's something ideally the states could agree upon uh, if they could negotiate something on the surplus flows. But um, the compact doesn't, to me, it doesn't say Nebraska gets every drop of surplus flows that comes down. That I don't I don't think I'd be surprised if the court went with that as an interpretation of that. That's something we'll have to wait and see.
Mhm. Great. Well, thank you, Dave, very much for the great webinar and great answers to the questions here. Unfortunately, there are just too many questions that are coming in here to answer during our hour as we're past our time already. But you see Dave's contact information there on the screen. We definitely encourage you to get in touch with Dave if you want to follow up after this, or if you did not have the chance to get your question answered again. Sorry about that. A lot of great questions today. We are over time, so I want to respect everybody's time, Dave's time, and want to thank you very much for attending today. You'll see a really short survey as you close out the webinar, and we would love your feedback on how it went and any ideas you have for future webinars from the Center for Ag Profitability. Again, these usually happen every Thursday at noon Central. We'll be off next week, actually, because we'll be out at Husker Harvest Days, so we hope you'll stop by the Nebraska Extension Building if you find yourself there at Husker Harvest Days. But Dave Aiken, I want to thank you again for a great presentation, and I hope you and everyone attending here has a great afternoon.
Thank you, Ryan.
Take care.